Let me break it down for you. CarMax, the biggest player in the used car market, just suffered an absolutely staggering blow. They lost 47% of their market value in a single trading day. To put that into perspective, that's roughly $3.2 billion wiped away in 24 hours. This isn't some minor dip or a quick bounce-back moment. It's a dramatic collapse that signals deep systemic problems. What makes this even more alarming is what CarMax's CEO said. He openly admitted that the company can no longer predict the direction of the used car market. That's huge. CarMax built its reputation on using sophisticated data analysis and forecasting models to stay ahead of trends. If they're throwing up their hands, it's a clear sign the entire market is in chaos. This isn't just about CarMax. It's a red flag for the whole automotive industry and everyone involved, from dealers and lenders to everyday consumers. The used car market is a massive pillar of the economy, and when one of its biggest players falters this badly, it ripples across supply chains, financing, and ultimately, what you pay at the dealership. Why should you care? Because the impact is already starting to reach consumers. It means tighter financing options, fewer quality used cars available, and possibly higher prices or longer wait times. If you're planning to buy or sell a car in the next year, understanding what's happening here is critical. In this series, we'll dig deep into what caused this crash, from inventory mistakes to tightening loans and a rising wave of defaults, and what it means for the average car buyer. We'll also look at how automakers and lenders are scrambling to adapt, and why this might be just the beginning of a larger automotive reset. So if you want to stay ahead of these changes and understand the future of the car market, hit that subscribe button now. Up until now, we've talked numbers, falling sales, tightening credit, rising defaults. But behind every default is a person, a story, and a financial system that's starting to fail real people. If you want to truly understand how deep this crisis runs, you have to look at the human side, because this isn't just a market correction, it's a personal disaster unfolding at scale. Let's talk about what it looks like for the average borrower. Imagine someone who bought a used SUV in 2022. Maybe it was a $28,000 vehicle. Nothing fancy, just reliable transportation for commuting, taking the kids to school, and running errands. At the time, that was a pretty average price for a used car. But with interest rates nearing 9% and loan terms stretching out to 72 or even 84 months, their monthly payment easily hit $500 to $600. Add insurance, maintenance, and gas, and you're talking about $1,000 a month just to keep the car on the road. Now fast forward to today. Rent has gone up. Groceries cost more. Utilities have spiked. Wages? For most people, those stayed the same. Maybe this person lost a few hours at work. Maybe their partner got laid off. Now that $1,000 car burden becomes the first thing to go. Not because they're irresponsible, but because there's just nothing left to give. And this scenario is playing out everywhere. Tens of thousands of families are watching their cars get repossessed, not because they were reckless buyers, but because the system was built on the assumption that cheap debt would last forever, and that people would always find a way to keep up. But it's not working anymore. Repossession agents, many of whom are independent contractors, are seeing record demand. Cars are being taken back at 2 a.m., from apartment complexes, from hospital parking lots, from driveways. Some people willingly surrender their keys, others cry. Some beg for more time. It's not just a business transaction, it's a breaking point. And every time a borrower defaults, it's not just a missed payment, it's a ripple. The lender loses money. The car goes back to auction and sells for less than what's owed. That loss adds pressure on future borrowers. Lenders respond by tightening standards even more, which means fewer people can buy cars, which means fewer sales for dealerships. And the cycle continues. Even worse, for many Americans, a car isn't a luxury. It's their only way to work. Once the car is gone, the job becomes harder to keep. And when the job goes, everything else begins to crumble. It's a domino effect that leaves families in financial quicksand. This is the part of the story that Wall Street earnings reports don't capture. the part that never shows up in quarterly forecasts or PowerPoint slides. But it's real, and it's growing. This isn't just a correction in the car market. It's an affordability collapse that's touching the lives of millions of people, one vehicle at a time. For the last few years, the used car market defied gravity. Prices were exploding, inventory was scarce, and buying a used car, normally seen as a smart, cost-conscious decision, suddenly became one of the most inflated transactions in the economy. Some used cars were selling for more than their original MSRP when new. It was insane. At the peak of the bubble, the average used car price in America crossed $30,000. People were financing 6-year-old vehicles for 72 months. Rental car companies were buying at auction like sharks, paying above retail just to rebuild their fleets. Even private sellers were flipping cars for profit, turning 3-year-old SUVs into short-term investments. And companies like CarMax? They leaned into the frenzy. Hard. They bought high. They paid premiums at auction. They overstocked expensive models, convinced the demand would never slow. Their entire machine, from financing to pricing to logistics, was built around the assumption that high margins and high demand would continue indefinitely. But that fantasy is over. What we're seeing now is the slow, painful deflation of a market that got completely detached from reality. Used car prices are falling. Not dramatically in every case, but enough to leave thousands of buyers, dealers, and lenders in a terrible position. Customers who bought at the top of the market are now underwater. They owe more on their loans than the vehicle is worth. A 2021 Ford Escape. Someone financed for $29,000. It might be worth $20,000 today. That $9,000 difference makes it almost impossible to sell, trade in, or refinance without taking a huge loss. And for dealers like CarMax, the inventory they paid inflated prices for is now aging on the lot, depreciating by the day. Every unsold car is not just a missed opportunity, it's a liability. If they try to drop the price to match today's market, they lose money. If they keep the price high, the car won't move. Either way, it bleeds the business. This bursting bubble is especially dangerous because of how fast things changed. The market went from explosive demand to choking oversupply in less than 18 months. Dealers are now scrambling to unwind overpriced inventory and salvage cash flow. But with rising interest rates, fewer qualified buyers, and falling values, it's like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a coffee mug. The other casualty in this crash? Consumer trust. Buyers who overpaid are angry. Those who feel trapped in long loans on depreciating vehicles are frustrated, and many are starting to swear off dealers entirely, turning to private sales or even holding off on buying altogether. This is a reset, a painful one, and it's far from over. While CarMax dominates the headlines, the most brutal part of this collapse is happening in silence, at the ground level, among thousands of small and mid-sized independent dealerships. These are the corner lot operations, family-owned businesses, and community staples that have served local buyers for decades. And right now, they're disappearing. These independent dealers operate on razor-thin margins. They don't have billion-dollar finance arms or national ad campaigns. They rely on 3 things to survive: fast inventory turnover, steady subprime lending, and access to floor plan credit. Short-term loans used to stock their lots with vehicles. But in 2024 and now into 2025, all 3 pillars are collapsing at once. Let's start with floor plan financing. This is a lifeline for small dealers. But rates have spiked, and lenders are pulling back. Banks are increasingly reluctant to finance used car inventory, especially after seeing default rates skyrocket. So for dealers, stocking 15 to 20 cars now costs more, and the risk of those cars sitting unsold for months makes every purchase feel like gambling with loaded dice. Then there's the inventory itself. Like CarMax, small dealers stocked up on mid-range vehicles when the market was hot. But now that buyers are demanding cheaper options and credit is harder to get, those $24,000 crossovers and $20,000 sedans just sit there day after day, losing value. Many of these dealers don't have the cash buffer to ride out slow sales. Every unsold car is capital frozen in place. So they start cutting prices, slashing profit just to stay liquid. It becomes a race to the bottom. And if the floor plan loans come due before the car sells, they're stuck paying out of pocket. That's when doors start closing for good. But the biggest killer of all, subprime financing drying up. These smaller dealers depend on third-party lenders to approve high-risk buyers. Without those approvals, their customer base evaporates. And with so many lenders exiting the subprime space or tightening standards, dealers are left with buyers who want to buy, but can't. So what are they doing to survive? Some are resorting to buy here, pay here models, taking on the lending risk themselves. But that means managing repossessions, chasing payments, and carrying bad debt, a risky business in a time when defaults are exploding. Others are holding liquidation events, advertising massive discounts in a last-ditch effort to recover cash. Some are quietly closing shop, walking away from years, sometimes decades, of hard work. This isn't just a business failure story. It's a collapse of trust and infrastructure in the used car economy. In many rural towns and low-income communities, these dealers were the only access point to affordable cars. Without them, buyers are left with fewer options, longer travel distances, and even less negotiating power at bigger franchise lots. The irony? These are the dealers who made the car industry run in the background. While Wall Street chased EVs and subscription models, these small operators kept working-class America on the road. And now they're being wiped out, quietly, one by one. Now that we've covered the massive market crash and why it's a huge warning for the whole industry, let's dive into what's really breaking down inside CarMax's business model, because that's where the story gets even more intense. CarMax has long been known as a data-driven powerhouse. They used advanced algorithms and analytics to predict what types of cars would sell, how much inventory to stock, and how to price vehicles competitively. Their business was built on precision forecasting, strong supply chain management, and balancing demand with supply in real time. But right now, all those systems have completely failed. Inventory is piling up everywhere. Their car lots, places that should be bustling with turnover, are packed with unsold vehicles. Overflow is spilling into driveways, employee parking lots, and even nearby fields. This is not normal. When you see this level of excess inventory in a business that relies on moving cars quickly, it means they're stuck with products nobody wants. The core of the problem? CarMax bet heavily on mid-range vehicles priced between $25,000 and $35,000. This segment was profitable and attractive for years, but the market has shifted drastically. Today, more and more buyers are hunting for cars priced between $15,000 and $20,000. Economic pressures are forcing people to look for cheaper options, cars that cost less upfront and come with lower loan payments. The issue is that these cheaper vehicles are either in very short supply or not in good enough condition to resell. So CarMax's lots are full of the wrong kinds of cars, overpriced vehicles that no longer match consumer demand, and not enough affordable options for budget-conscious buyers. This mismatch is killing sales and cash flow. Think about what this means for a company like CarMax. Every car sitting unsold represents money tied up, depreciation, and costs that don't go away: storage, insurance, maintenance. The longer these cars sit, the more they lose value, and the bigger the financial strain. This bottleneck is essentially choking the business's ability to generate revenue. To make matters worse, the used car market is a highly competitive space. Dealers all over the country are scrambling to adjust their inventory to match the new realities of buyer preferences. But CarMax's scale means any mistake is magnified. Their massive inventory investments now look like miscalculations that threaten their entire operation. This inventory crisis isn't isolated either. It feeds into a vicious cycle. Slow sales mean less cash flow, which forces tighter credit policies on buyers, which we'll get into next. And that further depresses sales, worsening the problem. Understanding this inventory breakdown is key because it reveals just how out of sync the business is with the current market. It's not just about cars on a lot. It's about a company built to predict and meet demand that's now struggling to keep up with a rapidly changing economy and consumer behavior. Now that we understand the crushing inventory issues and the tightening financing environment, let's take a closer look at how CarMax is responding to this perfect storm. Inside the company, the mood is grim, and the leadership is preparing for several very different outcomes, none of them easy. First off, CarMax is increasing its loan loss reserves to $11.7 million. What does that mean? Essentially, they're setting aside a significant chunk of cash to cover anticipated defaults on auto loans. This is a clear signal they expect a serious wave of customers to stop making payments in the near future. It's a financial cushion, but it's also a warning sign of how deep the trouble could get. The reality is that even some prime borrowers, those with good credit scores, are starting to miss payments. Rising inflation, increasing gas prices, stagnant wages, and growing living expenses are squeezing Americans like never before. This isn't a problem isolated to subprime borrowers anymore. It's a broader affordability crisis affecting millions of car owners. Internally, CarMax is bracing for multiple possible scenarios. They're preparing for a soft landing, where the market stabilizes with moderate losses but manageable damage. They're also preparing for a hard crash, where defaults and inventory issues spiral out of control, causing serious financial strain. And in the worst case, they're even preparing for a total collapse of the used car industry as it currently exists. To adapt, CarMax has already started taking drastic actions. They're laying off employees, a painful but necessary step to cut costs in an uncertain environment. Cash flow management is becoming a top priority, with the company stockpiling cash to weather the storm ahead. These moves signal that CarMax expects rough waters for at least the near term. But layoffs and cash reserves aren't the only strategies. CarMax is experimenting with new business models in hopes of diversifying revenue streams and adapting to shifting consumer preferences. For example, they're testing vehicle subscription services, where customers pay a monthly fee to access a car without buying it outright. This model aims to reduce the reliance on traditional sales and appeal to buyers hesitant to commit to ownership. Additionally, CarMax is rolling out rent-to-own programs, which provide more flexible paths for customers who can't qualify for conventional financing. These programs could help capture a segment of the market that's been shut out by tightening credit, though they come with their own risks around defaults. All of these measures reflect a company scrambling to reinvent itself on the fly while trying to manage one of the toughest periods in its history. The stakes couldn't be higher, because if CarMax fails, the impact won't stop there. So now that we've seen the storm inside CarMax, it's important to understand that this crisis isn't contained to just one company. The ripple effects are devastating the entire automotive ecosystem, and that includes used car dealers, franchise dealerships, captive lenders, and most importantly, everyday consumers. Used car dealers across the country are feeling the pinch from the same inventory and financing issues crushing CarMax. They're sitting on excess vehicles that nobody wants to buy, and financing is tightening everywhere. Banks and captive lenders, those affiliated with automakers like Ford Credit, GM Financial, and others, are also freezing loans and tightening approval standards. This reduces the flow of money into the market, which means fewer buyers and even slower sales. Defaults are spreading beyond CarMax's customer base to other lenders and dealers, signaling a systemic problem. The once booming subprime auto loan machine that helped push millions of cars off lots is now collapsing. This is a fundamental shift, and it's hitting people where it hurts most: their wallets. But here's the real thread underneath all this: a deep consumer affordability crisis. This isn't about tariffs or supply chain hiccups. It's about millions of Americans who simply cannot afford to buy or finance vehicles anymore. Wages have stagnated, costs for essentials like housing and groceries have soared, and inflation is cutting into disposable income. For many, a car payment is no longer feasible. Automakers are reacting quietly but decisively. Giants like Ford, GM, and Stellantis are starting to close dealerships, cut production, and rethink how they finance and sell vehicles. This great automotive reset is reshaping the industry for the long term. It's a transformation driven by economic reality, and it will change how cars are bought, sold, and financed for years to come. For consumers, this means the car market is entering a new era, one where traditional ownership may give way to subscriptions, rent-to-own programs, and other flexible alternatives. Prices may shift, financing will tighten, and patience will be necessary as the industry adjusts. If you're watching this and planning to buy a car in the near future, understanding this landscape is crucial. It's not just about getting a good deal. It's about navigating an industry undergoing one of its most significant upheavals ever. The car market is in flux, and while that can feel overwhelming, being informed gives you a huge advantage. First, expect continued volatility. Prices may swing up and down as dealers and lenders adjust inventories and credit policies. Patience will be key. If you need a car urgently, be prepared to negotiate hard and explore alternative buying options like certified pre-owned vehicles or dealer financing programs with more flexible terms. Second, financing will be tougher, but not impossible. Improving your credit score and lowering your debt-to-income ratio can increase your chances of approval. Consider saving for a larger down payment. It reduces lender risk and might get you better loan terms. Third, keep an eye on emerging trends like vehicle subscriptions, rent-to-own plans, and even car-sharing services. These options can provide access to transportation without the long-term commitment or financial strain of ownership. They might not be for everyone, but they are growing quickly as the industry pivots. Fourth, stay informed. This crisis is evolving fast, with new developments every week. Follow trusted sources, subscribe to channels like this one, and don't hesitate to ask questions or seek advice before making big purchasing decisions. Finally, remember this isn't just a challenge, it's an opportunity. The automotive industry is reinventing itself, and those who adapt early could benefit from new models of ownership, better financing products, and more flexible ways to get behind the wheel. So whether you're a buyer, a seller, or just interested in the future of cars, staying ahead of these changes will empower you to make smarter decisions. Thanks again for watching, and if you found this series helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll be here with more insights as this story unfolds.